You are listening to The Pulse, Rod Murray's e-learning tech podcast.
Number 217, Jerome Pesenti of Sizzle AI. That teaser sounds like Joni Mitchell, but that's a piece called Both Sides Now by the Poryes Trio. Debbie is a jazz pianist, composer, teacher, and vocalist. If you like jazz, I'm sure you'll love this piece. Stay tuned for the piece at the end of my podcast. I'm happy to report that this episode is sponsored by NEDLA. That's the Northeast Digital Learning Association, nedla.org. NEDLA is a chapter of the USDLA, the United States Distance Learning Association. Please support my sponsor. Today I'm very pleased to share my interview with Jerome Pesenti, founder of Sizzle AI. Jerome discusses his extensive background in AI as the former vice president of IBM Watson, and after leaving vice president of AI for Meta after 4 years to start Sizzle. Sizzle is a free app that uses large language models to help learners work through any homework problem step by step. It aims to provide personalized and engaging learning experience for users, with the majority currently being high school students. He discusses the potential of AI in education, the importance of responsible implementation and regulation, and he also compares Sizzle to other educational platforms and shares his vision of competing for users' time against social media platforms. An interesting take. The episode concludes with Jerome encouraging listeners to try Sizzle for themselves and provide feedback. Quote, Sizzle AI is the future of learning, a free AI tutor for everyone, end quote. So without further ado, here's the interview. Jerome, thank you so much for joining me and my audience today. I'm really pleased to meet you and learn more about you and your product.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into Sizzle, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself and how you got involved and what your background is?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I want to do as a disclaimer is that I am not an ed specialist by any measure. I would say my biggest specialty there is I have 4 kids, and I spend a lot of time with them and tutoring them. I think they wish they didn't have to come to me, but I'm there, I would say, number one resource in terms of tutoring. So that's all my extent of, having gone to school myself and I have my kids. So I don't portray myself as a specialist. My background is in AI. I've been in that field for now 25 years. This is my 3rd AI startup. I've done 2 others, one in B2B space, text mining in 2000, before it was the fashion now. And then I sold it to IBM, and I was IBM for a few years. Also in AI, putting AI in the cloud. Then I did a switch to AI for drug discovery for a few years, another startup. And then my last role was at Meta as a head of AI there for the entire company. And then I left a year ago to do another startup, because this is the kind of thing I like to do. I like to build things. And I really thought that it was time to do something in learning and education with AI. And I thought there was an amazing opportunity there. And that's what Sizzle is about.
Great. Well, that's my bailiwick. I've been in higher ed my whole career, and I've always been about using technology to improve education. It's always been the holy grail to have a custom, individual tutor. And my heavens, we're there, almost there, or we're there. Why don't you tell my audience about what Sizzle does, how it works?
Yeah, I mean, so there's what it does today, and there's the vision. So what it does today is really like I would say a little bit of a tutor in a pocket. You give it a problem, and it helps you solve it. It tries to get you it gives you the steps, and then tries to get you to answer these steps one by one and walk you through the problem. So kind of like a work example that tries to get you to answer the steps each time. That's the first step we're trying to do. But really, our mission, we want to make learning amazing for everyone. And we want to create an experience that feels a lot more personalized, a lot more one-on-one. Where we'll go next is try to get people to come back to the app, to learn things, to commit to learning, to get feedback on how well they are doing, to give them a curriculum on how to learn a certain skill, and incentivize them to go through them one by one. So we start with homework help, but our goal is really to get people to learn really anything in the most engaging and effective way.
Who's your main audience? Is it middle school, high school, college, or all?
Today, it's really, I would say, majority of our users are high school. This is actually who we were targeting, looking at a high school problem and STEM problem. That's where we started. I would say it's more than 50%. We do have a good portion also middle school and college. I would say it makes the next 2 quarters of our audience.
Good. When did you actually get started? To be honest, hadn't heard about Sizzle until very recently. So when did you start?
Yeah, we launched actually pretty recently. We launched the app officially mid-August. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's very, very new. I'm going to have this in my show notes, but according to your website, it says Sizzle AI is the future of learning, a free AI tutor for everyone. So that sounds just wonderful. How do you make it free? How do you make any money?
So right now, our goal is to, our goal right now is to go for a wider audience and understand user behavior and collect interesting data. So we're trying to actually create better language models, get interesting data around what problems people are trying to solve. So our incentive at the moment is to build a large audience. And the goal is to create AI that can help people learn pretty much these problems. But if we can help them learn this problem, we'll be able to help people learn any kind of problems because we're not hard coding anything in the system. And we think at some point there will be a good audience that we can monetize, like people trying to upskill themselves, people trying to onboard in the company. So I think if we can do this use case, there'll be a lot of other use cases that are a lot more monetizable than kids in school. So this is where we're taking kind of a really a long-term approach of trying to provide something for free that in the past people have had to pay for, because it will allow us to create a really more, interesting and broader product that we feel we'll be able to monetize later on.
That sounds like a great idea. As long as you must have the backing to do it, which is great. How did your
the goal is we're trying to have a really broad vision and get the venture capital behind us that allow us to do this. Our goal is to be an app that 1 billion users will use one day. We're very ambitious. So,
oh, that's great. How does what did your experience at Meta? How did that inform the way you're going about producing this app, or the things that this idea came out of the blue with you? I hear you have children. I'm curious why you just didn't stay and do this in Meta, for example.
It was actually very informed by my experience at Meta. So maybe I can tell you a little bit of backstory. The thing when I was at Meta, I think, when I was there are a lot of interesting things I did, and I think, and my team did, things like PyTorch, using AI for content moderation, pretty impactful thing, using AI for ads, which works amazingly well. But I really wanted to do, how can you tackle this, this amazing power of AI to do something for people's life that they feel is extremely valuable to them. Sometimes we use AI to get people to come back to an app, to stay hooked up to it. But if you ask people, a month later, was that really valuable to you? It's not clear, And so what I want to do is an app that when people use it, like Sizzle, they feel a month later, they'd be like, oh, I really learned something. I spent some time on the app, but it brought me something that's going to be useful for my life. And that, makes me a better person. So that was really my driver for me. How can I use all this power of AI to do something that people feel really, really good about? I spend every day on Sizzle 10 minutes or 30 minutes and I feel good about it. That's my goal. Now, what's interesting is at Meta, we learn to get people to use these apps a lot more than people have done in education. They really have recipes that work amazingly well. We understand what makes products retentive. And so this is what I want to apply to the learning and education world, where retention is usually a big problem, whereas in social media apps, it has been their bread and butter.
Right. So that makes me wonder, are you promoting it actively on Instagram and Facebook then, or is it just growing organically at this point?
No, we're doing both right now. I think most of the growth is organic, but we're also experimenting on how to promote it on TikTok and Instagram at the moment as well. But we are, we're we have delivered just a small portion of our vision. The goal at some point is to get a product that people come back. We want to have something like the daily sizzle. They come every day, they do something, and they feel, oh, I'm making progress towards my learning goals.
Okay. Give my audience sort of the range of subjects. It's mostly math and science. How would you describe that in terms of your main audience, your main?
Yeah, right now we're really trying to position it more as STEM, and advantage of a product like we have today compared to what was in the past, like photomath, is that you can handle like word problems, but also you can handle non-math problems, things like chemistry, physics, biology. Some people use it also for like broader problems. It does things. You can even ask it for a recipe. It will give you step by step to do this. We haven't designed it for that yet, But the technology behind it, which is large language models, tend to work equally well. The form factor right now is around step by step. Step by steps tend to be more meaningful for STEM problems at the moment.
Right. Yeah. I spent some time on it, and I like how that works in terms of asking a question, and then it asks you to respond. And if you don't want to just respond off the top of your head, it can prompt you for some choices, like a multiple choice test. But there's no grading per se. It's just helping people solve a problem.
Yeah, and this is actually the feature you point at is like one of the things we're trying to do is how do you get people? I mean, we do allow them to see the answer of each step, but we're trying to really like nudge them to do more, right? To test themselves or to answer it by themselves. So this is the game we want to be in, which is how do we get the user to do more and more on their own, And that's what we'll keep pushing feature in the app to get people to do a lot more and be more proficient in solving these kind of problems on their own.
This brings up a question that I think higher ed, a lot of education in general, is trying to determine how they're going to handle AI tools. I do a little bit of teaching. In fact, I teach a course in podcasting. I was offered this little adjunct position. I thought it might be fun, and I said, "How does your school handle AI?" They said, "Well, we can't use it when we turn in a written exam. We're not supposed to use it." And I don't know how they control that. And I said, "Well, for my course, there's no written exams. There's no multiple choice. It's all the audio that you're producing." So my philosophy is, people say, well, they're going to be put out of a job by AI. I say, no, you're going to be put out of a job by a person who knows how to use AI better than you do. So right now, learn how to use AI as best you can. And, and people are saying, well, this is the end of the written exam. You just have to ask, verbally. You have to do an oral exam for many, many topics. What's your philosophy around using AI and cheating and that sort of thing?
So first, I want to say I really like what you said, which is, I've been in that space for a long time. You're not going to be replaced by AI, but you could be replaced by someone using AI better than you do. I think this is really what I want to two things, which means that schools just can't decide to ignore it, right? This is a tool. It's like, it will be in 10 years, like asking not to use this tool will be like, oh, you should go to school without a computer. That's not going to happen, right? This is the tool. To be honest, right today, like when I recruit people, this is one of the first things I ask them. When you code, are you using GPT? Are you using Copilot? It's an amazing tool. They're going to make you 50% more productive. Why wouldn't you use them? So I think it's really important to embrace this. Now, it doesn't mean that companies like ours don't have a responsibility. I think we really do have a responsibility. And this is why for us, as a top objective that we are taking is to get people to learn, not to cheat, not to get the answers, but really try to incentivize them to really do the work or really get the skills. But it also means that we are conscious that this tool exists, that it's Sizzle or others, there will be a tool for people to see answers. And ultimately, that's not what matters if people get the answer right or wrong, right? It's that, can they show their work? Can they do it there, right? And we can see if they do actually, right? In our app, we can report back on that. So I think that's going to be a future. I'm optimistic that the future will be good. It means the school embracing it and the people providing it optimizing for the right thing, right? Not just providing some shortcuts that ultimately don't really solve anything.
Right. So you sound like you're an optimist like me. I write a newsletter on I'm the militant optimist, and I write about the good things and how technology is going to help us in the future. So I think we're on the same page there. There's been so much talk about the existential threat of AI. What's your view on that?
Again, I think it's the same. I mean, in terms of like, I don't buy it in terms of replacing people. I mean, the whole history of automation has shown that it creates so much value that you can like get even more economic activity out of the end. I think it will be the same. I do think it will be a tool that's unavoidable. Again, it will feel in 10 to 20 years the same as not using a computer, which is a non-starter in most jobs out there, right? But the third thing is I do think that with great power comes great responsibility, and you need to be, there needs to be some regulation around it. There needs to be some understanding of deep aspect. I'm not at all a doomer, which is I think the problems that the doomers talk about it are just not relevant today. It's not about AI taking over. It's still pretty dumb overall. It's people don't quite understand how well it's amazing what it does, but it's not human at all. Like it doesn't do things the same way. It's like it's very knowledgeable about everything, right? It can incorporate a lot of knowledge, but it's based on a lot of memory rather than deep, knowledge, understanding, or deep reasoning behind it. It's still very useful. So I'm not going to replace people, and we still have a lot of control over it. But badly implemented, right? It can, duplicate bias, for example, which can be a huge problem. It can disrupt, learning, like you said, right? It could be like a cheating tool. So how do we actually go around this, right? How do we design it in a way that incentivizes for the right thing? It's a lot more important to understand what are the objectives of that AI, how is it coded, versus like just thinking, oh, it's going to take over the world, or saying, oh, there's no problem with it. It's
right.
The reality is in the middle.
Getting back to your app, it's available on the web, and there's an app. There's also an app you can download to, I guess, iOS and Android, I'm assuming. I haven't tried the app yet. And what can you tell us about competition? I know Khan Academy has been around for a long time, and they have a new AI-powered tutor called Khan Amigo. How can you compare your product to Khan Amigo, for example?
Yeah, so first, the product, as you mentioned, we started with an app both on Android and iOS. And we just launched actually the web version. So you can use it on desktop, just a web browser, just yesterday, actually. So that was our...
Really?
Yes.
One of your first users today.
Yes, it was really a recent. I do think right now competition is good. I think people are trying to figure out what is the way that learning will leverage this language model, that power this language model. My view, I think it's interesting to see what everybody is doing. I think it's super interesting to see Khan Academy like embracing it and Khan Amigo, and I think it's a very interesting and pretty well done implementation. Our view, though, is that I think the interface will be a lot less chat-like and a lot more fit for purpose. I think one of the challenges with just pure chat interface, like if you try to use Khan Amigo, is like you do all this work and it asks you a lot of questions. It's kind of cool, how it works. But then after, okay, you've been successful, and it just looks the same. It says, hey, you did it. Okay, cool. Let's move on to something else. As a student, it feels like, okay, did I make progress? Did I, like you need incentives, right? You need a feeling like of completion. You need a feeling. So having an interface that's just like text that comes back each time, and there's no like, nothing that shows you're making progress. There's no. So I do feel like people will integrate this technology in a lot more fit for purpose UIs, like last for us, right? We show you, okay, here are the steps, you did it right, here are the options, and you can click, you can answer, there are more like, multi-line interaction to it than a simple like chat. Chat is one way of doing it, but I think there are other ways to do that. So that's our bet. And the second would be like, you need to understand the user and you need to personalize what's going on, right? So as you interact multiple times, each chat can be not starting from scratch, right? You need to start really getting a deep understanding. We haven't really implemented that in the app, but this is really the future for us. Deep understanding users and personalizing to what they are and who they are,
Right. So that's another step where it's like some of like ChatGPT, or I use Perplexity AI. It keeps your threads as long as you have an account. You can go back and continue with the thread.
but it doesn't really learn across the thread, right? So like what you did with it one thread didn't really help the next thread to understand who you are, what you're trying to do. Obviously, in a pure chat, I mean, ChatGPT is very general, right? But in a learning environment, what we can do is understand what you're trying to learn and keep that going, right? Like that you connect with us today or in a week, we can see how much progress you've made. We can see what you're trying to learn and keep the context going, right?
Yeah, of course, it reminds me of, I've always been a proponent of learning management systems. Maybe the students don't like it, but some of the teachers don't like it either. But I helped to bring Blackboard into my institution I worked for back in the late '90s, and they had either built it their own technologies, or they often incorporate other technologies. I can certainly see having a plug-in to a learning management system using LTI, where they would go into Sizzle and have some hooks so they could analyze, the outcomes. Is that something that you're involved with yet, or plan to do, to sort of team up or make an interface, an API for learning management systems that might help you?
But right now,
Yeah, it just might help you with the analytics piece of it in terms of tracking progress and so on.
Yeah, so at the moment we are just a direct to student, a direct to learner. That's our go-to-market. We do feel that there is a big opportunity there, because as this learner use our product, we can see like where they are struggling, where they're having problem, where they're working problem. So imagine like if a classroom was all using Sizzle, right? We could report back to the teacher, hey, for this class of problems, this is where your students are actually struggling. And it would not actually be very complicated for us to do that. Like we do have that information and we can analyze it, and there are amazing tools right now to be able to do that. The challenge for us is like, how do we get plugged in? There's complexity in integrating. So I do see that as part of the future, especially because in our view right now, we may not want even to sell to school. We'd love to even give it for free to them. But, we're not keen in doing complex integration or complex, long sales cycle. But I'd love to find a way to do this. I'd love to find a way to give that insight back to the teachers, and maybe they can just recommend us. That's the trade I would love to do right now.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that, because first of all, students, they move around a lot. They change their majors. They, I think less than half of the students that start at an institution end up graduating from there, So having it personalized to that student that can follow them throughout their career, it's certainly a great way to think about it. Absolutely. Looking at, I follow AI. I'm not follow it in depth in terms of the technology, but I'm just curious in terms of the large language model. Do you use something like ChatGPT? Do you build your own models? How does that work?
Actually, both, right? So at the moment, if you use the app, sometimes it touches GPT-4. Sometimes it touches our own model, actually, like built, by fine-tuning some other model. So we have actually, a good set of models right now, like almost like a dozen running for different tasks. And even in the problem solving, some of that is routed to our own. So we're trying to learn to do this. GPT-4 is very good. I would say it's the state of the art right now in problem solving. But as we're collecting really interesting data, we're starting to deploy our own things as well.
Yeah, I remember trying it with ChatGPT 3.5. It wasn't so good on some arithmetic. I mean, it would make mistakes. So I assume they fixed that in 4.5 or whatever the
no,
the
really,
latest.
actually, right? So we use 4 right now, and it's way better than 3.5. I would say my view at the moment is that we will benefit from having like calculations done by real calculators. I think there are like some simple tasks that a language model has a hard time to do, like arithmetics or even like completing like floating points, for example, manipulation. And there is this notion of tool use, which you kind of do in language model, but it's not really well developed. And I think that's one of the future way to making the system much more accurate.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard for me to get it's hard enough for most people to get their head around how these large language models work. I mean, I have a general idea in terms of adjusting all this text and so forth and predicting the next word and so forth. But integrating that with math and some high-end calculations, that interface seems, I just can't imagine how that works. I don't know if there's anything you can say to help me understand that a little bit better. How do you interface the two?
Yeah, so today, right, you can do some arithmetic. I mean, if you ask simple arithmetic to GPT-4, it will do it pretty well.
Like,
and it happens because, well, this is where, there's things like, if you start doing like floating point operation, I think you will start seeing the limits pretty quickly. It's not a universal calculator, right? But it's such a general understanding of a lot of the pieces of the world that many of these kind of algorithms are embedded in that system. It's pretty amazing. By just like reading all the information in the world, this system are able to kind of like approximate and sometimes even implement some of these algorithms. But there's limits to this. Like it's not a calculator, and it will make mistakes, especially from things where it's very detailed calculation. So what you can do is you can get the system to kind of know how to use a calculator. It's what's called tool use, because they know the API to the calculator, let's say, or to Wolfram Alpha, for example.
Oh, okay.
And so they can learn to use that. And because an API call is a lot more like actually language manipulation, then instead of doing like, pi divided by, e at the power of 2, they will basically send that to the calculator and get the answer,
Yeah, that helps me understand. I understand about Wolfram Alpha, and I know that sort of interface would really help that move that along.
Right. And Wolfram Alpha is a very different technology. It's not a language model. It's much more like a set of like wrapped up rules that ultimately use a standard calculator, in some steps at the bottom,
Right.
And so it's usually accurate, but it's a lot less flexible.
In looking briefly, I haven't had that much time to spend on the website, but for example, for those out there that are interested in this, I was intrigued by the fact that I think one sample or one example I saw was that a student could take a picture of a word problem from a book or their own handwriting, I don't know, and then your system would attempt to answer that. Is that correct? Is that possible?
That's right. Yeah, that's the main model. I mentioned that earlier. It's a bit like the model, that PhotoMath had popularized a few years ago. So really the default thing is you take a picture of a problem or you upload a picture, and the system does OCR, it does character recognition. It can even parse all the formulas out of it, and then it solves it, or at least it gives you the steps to solve it and walk you step by step through it.
That is just intriguing. I would love to test it. I co-authored a book years ago on pharmacologic calculations, and it'd be fun to try to take a snapshot of some equations there and see what your system can do with it. But it's just fascinating.
And you'll see, at the moment, the system has the standard limitation, which it's actually pretty good at coming up with steps. I would say the steps, from our understanding, are like around 90% relevant each time and pretty like helpful. But it will get calculations wrong at times, And there's a good like 20% of problems where it does get some of the calculation here and there wrong, but the steps are usually accurate. So you have to be careful. And that's something we're working on solving and making some progress on.
Yeah. How do you validate this going forward? Do you have a team that's somehow
we have benchmarks actually. So we do have benchmarks. So we have a set of like problems, both like standard benchmark that exists out there and also like set of problem we have collected ourselves. And we do evaluate what we're doing against this benchmark and see like what accuracy we get,
Yeah, that's great. I bet there are listeners out there that can't wait to try their hand at this. And I'll just tell them it's Sizzle, Sizzle AI, but the URL, I really you're lucky to get a 3-letter URL, SZL.ai. So if you're looking, how do I get to this?
It's one of the shortest URL out there, right?
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate that. Oh, the other thing I want to ask you about before we go, It looks like your logo looks like a Japanese character. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean it's the kanji character for fire.
For fire. Okay. Okay.
Sizzle, fire. But we're
Yeah.
actually we did bring in a designer. This is actually I came up with that logo, and most likely will get replaced at some point. So we're actually in the process of discussing that as a team.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, if somebody saw that, the Japanese person saw that, they said, "Oh, this is about recipes and how to cook, maybe."
But
Really?
the name actually is interesting. The reason we picked this name is because this is about making learning a lot more fun and engaging, and ultimately a lot more amazing. And this is about taking time from people spend on social media today, right? It's like, so our goal is real ambitious. We want people to learn every day in a way that feels good to them and engaging. And so we're not really trying to compete against, like Khan Academy or Coursera. We're trying to compete against TikTok and Instagram and Twitter for people's time.
Well,
So that's the
maybe you
big
have to offer them badges, as they complete different things, to
That's
collect
right. We
badges.
will get there at some point, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Well, Jerome, this has been fascinating. It sounds like you have a wonderful product. I certainly wish you the best. I'm sure you certainly have the background for it. That's for sure. Is there anything you want to leave my audience with? Anything even more exciting that's around the corner that you can?
No, I mean,
Okay.
just go try it out, like ZL.ai, or you can type Sizzle in any app stores. We do have a lot of things coming up, I think stay posted on one there. I mean, the next feature we'll push in will be things where you can actually get feedback on your homework or how you completed it, which actually both students and teachers could use, right? So you give it a solution and the system will tell you how well you've done. And then after that, we're going to really try to get you to commit to learning and come back to the app, every day and give you like a plan. How do you master that skill, or how do you solve this exercise on your own? So a
Yeah.
lot of exciting things in the future, but the app is functional right now, and go try it and give us feedback.
It's an exciting world we're living in. It changes so quickly.
Yes. I mean, it's the opportunity. Things have to change, and I think education is right for it.
That's
The
for
model
sure.
of education hasn't changed, in my view, in hundreds of years, and I think we can do better. That's not that I know how, but I think you can learn how to do better. That's my philosophy.
Oh yeah. Oh. Well, I'll certainly follow you and look for good things. So thanks so much
All
again.
right. Thank you so much for having me. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jerome Pesenti. So stay tuned for Both Sides Now by the Debbie Poryes Trio. Until next time, have a great week.
The preceding audio commentary is the product of the author, Dr. Rodney Murray, and does not represent the official viewpoint of any other institution or company.